Hey everyone, it's Evelyn. Now last week I went over my top 10 focal flowers, which means of course that this week I'm going to go over my top 10 filler flowers. But before we start, I wanted to remind everybody that I've got a new video coming one video per month extra over and above the Saturday videos that I do. And what that's going to be is after all the Saturday videos of the month, so for example January, because that's what we're in, on the following Wednesday, which will be January 29th, I'm going to be doing a Q&A video to answer some or all of the questions that have been asked in the previous videos of that month. And I got 5 questions to answer already from last week's video, so that's really exciting me. So you'll have to make sure you ask lots of questions and in the comment section below, and you watch that video to hear all the answers that I give. So without any further ado, let's get on with the video. Now, filler flowers, I'm not going to do the top 10 in order of 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th, etc. like I did with the focals. I can't do that with the fillers because it's really related to what the focals are that are blooming at the time versus what the fillers are that are blooming at the time. So it's going to sort of be in order of earliest to bloom, not broom, to latest to bloom, but not necessarily. And definitely the earliest to bloom is the first one I'm going to talk about, which is actually kale. Nobody considers that a flower to use in bouquets. Kale is an edible. And while we don't eat kale, we don't like it. A lot of people do. My dogs get it in their dog food because it's one of the really healthiest greens you can give your dog. My dogs do eat meat, but greens are important in their diet as well. So, kale. Why kale? Because they have these beautiful yellow little flowers that bloom really, really early in the season. And for me, they bloom in May. And I would say that I'm not too sure how many people are able to get kale blooming in May because one or two, I can't remember if it's one or two. I keep saying one, but it might actually be 2 plants, has decided to perennialize, and this is the 3rd winter it's going through, which means it will bloom again. So I will have blooms from this kale plant that I planted multiple years ago, and they will come in very, very handy. Now, what they come in handy for is my early blooming ranunculus, not ranunculus, I'm getting all confused, my peonies. So you can see here I have a Bartzella peony in the front, that big, beautiful yellow flower. I have an allium in the back, which is a globe master. I even have some red rhododendrons tucked in there low, which are from a bush that overhangs my fence. I have a rhododendron in my garden too. It's a pink one, but it does not hold up as a cut flower. My neighbor's red one does. Have no idea what kind it is. And it does have to get pruned. So I do the prunings at this time of year, which is in May. In fact, this bouquet was made on May 25th. And I use the prunings in the bouquets because I have them, so it kind of makes up for the time and effort that I have to put into cutting them by using them. But as you can see, it would be a really, really tight bouquet. It's got sand cherry branches and, yeah, again, that maple leaf that I can never remember the name of. I think it's pine crest golden maple. Well, I'll put it on the screen as I usually do because I can't remember. It would be a really, really tight ball, but then it's got those kale flowers that come in and out of it, which is just super interesting and funky and adds that little bit of extra razzle-dazzle to the bouquet, I think. And that's why I really, really love the kale flower as a filler flower, and it makes my top 10 because there's really no other filler flower that I have at that time of year. Now, the next filler flower is bachelor's buttons, but not any bachelor buttons. I've tried the blue, don't like it. I've tried the 3 classic mixes, one of which is, I don't remember the names of them. One's called Romance, and I think that's the red one, and you have shades of red from white all the way up to red. And then there's another one that has shades of white all the way up to purple, and then there's another one that has shades of blue from white all the way up to blue, and I don't like any of those. But what I do love is black button bachelor buttons. I love that deep deep burgundy shade that they are, which, you know, if you follow me for any length of time, isn't going to surprise you at all, because it is one of my favorite colors in a lot of different flowers that I grow. And it's just this little tiny head, which can pop up from a bouquet and add a lot of real interesting texture and fun. So as you can see in this bouquet, which was taken on August 2nd, made on August 2nd, I've got it paired with a lot of dinner plate dahlias. I've got the Lindsay Michelle, which is the one with the fuchsia outer circle, the fuchsia center of the donut, and then the strong yellow wrapped around the fuchsia center. It's also got an AC Loomis, which is the crimson one with the white frosting on the underside of the leaves. There's a gold light sunflower kind of tucked in beneath them, which pulls out the yellow of the Lindsay Michelle dinner plate. I've got some green poppy pods in there, and then some laurel leaves around the bottom, and as you can see, and a little bit of white marjoram as well, and possibly, yeah, and purple marjoram as well. And then, of course, those beautiful black button bachelor buttons popping up the top. And what they add is they add airiness to the bouquet, because, again, otherwise it would be quite a solid sphere with not much depth and interaction, just a sphere. But by putting those black button bachelor buttons up a little bit higher than it, as well as, what are those? That's part of the black button bachelor buttons, I believe, that are even sitting up higher than them. But that adds the airiness through the bouquet. I remember somebody once saying that when you make a bouquet, butterflies should be able to fly through parts of it. So think of that when you make a bouquet, that you want to have a little bit of airiness so that the butterflies can travel through it. And this one achieves that. So the next filler flower that I'm going to talk about was a new one for me last year. Just absolutely love it. Love it. When I ordered it, I had never seen it before. I just saw it in the photograph, which is this photograph here. And I thought, that looks really cool. I love that. I need that in my bouquets, assuming it looks like that. And I ordered the hair alliums, and I was not disappointed. They look so much fun in a bouquet. As you can see here, I've got a Globemaster allium tucked down, and then I have snapdragons coming out all the way around it. I have some parsley umbels also coming out around it, because the thing with the Globemaster or Ambassador alliums is they're quite dense, so anything that you put with it kind of goes out and around it like that. If you use it down low, you can always have it up high, but I like it sitting down low. But then you end up with this sort of hollow spot up above. And the thing about the hair allium is it's wide, so it kind of fits into that hollow spot. And it's got that sort of springing kind of feel to it, which is like you stuck your finger in an electric socket, and that's what your hair does. And I just think it adds so much of a fun and funky visual and visceral interest to the bouquet. I mean, you just want to reach out and touch it. So yeah, I love the hair allium. So the next thing I'm going to do has nothing to do with flowers. I'm going to ask, if you have been enjoying this video so far, please consider giving it a like down below. Really appreciate it. Now we're going to talk about astilbe. I grow astilbe in 3 shades. I grow it in the sort of brownish fuchsia color. I grow it in a red, and I grow it in the bridal veil white. I have no idea what the pinker and the redder ones are called, because I have carted portions of those plants with me over the years for more than one property. And I can't even remember if I originally bought them or if they came with our original property. And then I liked them so much I just brought them with me, even though I wasn't doing flower farming then. So yeah, no idea what they're called. Maybe one day I'll figure it out. But when I've gone and looked on sites to give me the names of all the astilbes, there's really too many choices. So we'll just call it a pink one, a red one, and the bridal veil white one. Now they happen in, I believe, June. Let me just double check that here on my computer. They happen in, maybe late June, early July. And it's interesting because they kind of go in sequence. They don't bloom at the same time. And don't quote me on this, but I believe the first one to bloom is the pink, then the red, and then the white. So they have about a week to 2 weeks each, depending on what the weather is like that year. So because they bloom in sequence, you have astilbe blooming for a longer length of time. And they, again, add a real visceral interest to the bouquets other than visual, because they do have that sort of thing that you want to reach out and touch them. And what they do is, as you can see in this bouquet, I've got it paired with an orange sunflower, a gold light sunflower. There's a Bordeaux anemone off to one side. I've got my Shasta daisy, what's that called? Snowdrift Shasta daisy poking up near the center. I've got some green poppy pods in there, laurel leaves, and then the astilbe. Now, in this particular bouquet, these astilbe are starting to sort of finish their cycle. You can tell even in the picture, they're looking a little bit crispier than they would when they were fresher. When they're fresher, they look really, really fluffy. But even though they're not looking as fluffy as they do earlier on in their peak part of their season, they just add so much to the bouquet, because again, they can sit up higher and they can create that openness to the bouquet that this particular bouquet otherwise might not have. It would have it a bit with those green poppy pods. But again, it gives that butterflies can travel through it feel, which I really, really love. And with the 3 different colors, it keeps it interesting. You're not just using the pink, the red, or the white. You're using one or the other. And I really, really enjoy using astilbe in bouquets when they're fresh. But I also enjoy using it when it's dried. Now, you can leave them to dry on the plant. They will turn, well, not dry, you can leave them on the plant and they will turn brown, as you can see in this bouquet here. But they still feel fresh because they're very, very pliable. So they are a fresh brown filler addition to a late bouquet. This one's taken on October 23rd. But if you cut them when they still have color, they will keep the color that they have dried. They won't feel fresh. They'll be quite stiff in their texture, but they'll keep more color. So there's 2 ways that you can use them later on in the season. You can use them freshly cut but brown, or dried but with color. And I find them very, very useful later on in the season. For example, here, like I said, October 23rd, when I don't have a lot of fillers blooming, kind of like the kale at the beginning of the season. And here, I've got it paired with a tartan dinner plate dahlia, a Wanda's Aurora dinner plate dahlia. I've got a Bolt ball dahlia, which is the yellow one. Tartan was the purple dinner plate dahlia, and Wanda's Aurora was the one that has burnt orange shades with yellow. So the Bolt yellow ball dahlia, and then I've got an Edinburgh ball or decorative dahlia, depending on whom you're talking to, tucked around the back, which is the lighter purple. I've got laurel leaves around the base of the bouquet. I've got dried poppy pods coming out the top, and then the fresh brown astilbe coming out the top as well. And the astilbe, along with the laurel leaves, give that openness to the bouquet that I keep talking about. After that, we're going to talk about yarrow. Yarrow I love. I don't have a lot of it, unfortunately. I have a very, very tiny patch of it. And I say unfortunately, I could grow more, but I'm at that point in my tiny urban flower farm that in order to increase the amount of something that I grow, I have to decrease the amount of something else that I'm growing. And while I would like more yarrow, I haven't decided what I want to decrease to increase the yarrow. So when it's blooming, my tiny, tiny little patch of it gets used, but it is a tiny patch. I'm going to say it's only maybe about 2-3 square feet, not very much at all. And these are literally the 4 colors that I have in that tiny little patch. I really should increase it. I got to figure out where I'm going to grow more of it. Maybe I should just grow more of it in pots because it likes dried conditions. So I could try that. Maybe try growing some on my deck, which doesn't seem to, which is really, really hot and very little likes to grow up there. Maybe I'll try some yarrow. That's a good point. I might try some yarrow up there. Anyway, so for the yarrow in bouquets, when I use my vintage red yarrow, it's much shorter stemmed, but it's still useful because I just have it lower down in the bouquet. So you can see I've got in this bouquet the red vintage or vintage red yarrow down low, but I have more yarrow up high, which is the golden yarrow, And then I've got sunflowers spilling around in the center with some more laurel leaves as well. And what's so cool about the yarrow in bouquets is it adds, again, the texture. So there's a common theme here where most of the filler flowers that I use because they add texture. The focal flowers add high impact, powerful color and volume. But the filler flowers add really, excuse me, really, really interesting texture. This bouquet was taken on July 1st. Next filler flower we're going to talk about is one that I've had for quite a few years, and I've used, well, I should say my husband has used for culinary purposes because I don't cook, but fell in love with it as a filler flower this year for the first time. Don't know why I never used it before, and that's oregano or marjoram. Now, the reason I never used oregano or marjoram before this past year as a filler flower is because it's a spreader. So we keep the marjoram or oregano, whatever you want to call it, for its culinary purposes in a pot on our deck because that's really close to the kitchen. And it's in a shady spot, so it does fairly well. But it will still spread in the garden beds and the flower beds, and it does. And every year I haul up masses and masses of it as it pops up. And this year, for whatever reason, there was 2 sections where I left it to grow. Not quite sure why. I think it was because I knew that I wanted to dry more of it at the end of the year. I'm having to go back like last spring. Why did I not pull it up? And I think it was because we didn't have enough to dry for the winter, because it doesn't grow very well in the pot on the deck. It grows well enough for fresh use, and frankly, most herbs do better when they're a little bit tortured, so the fact that it doesn't do well on the deck is perfectly fine. So I left these 2 patches to grow in the 2 of the flower beds, and one ended up being white. I knew one was white and one was purple, and I thought, well, if I'm going to leave 2 patches to grow, I'll leave the only white patch that I had and one of the purple patches, and then I hauled out of the ground everywhere else that it was growing. And then it does like what most plants do. It went to flower in, I would say it started towards the end of July, and I wanted to see what it would look like just for experimentation in bouquets. And I tried it and I went, holy cow, I love this. And I used it constantly from that point on. And this particular bouquet was taken on August 13th. I've got it paired with an espresso gladiola. I've got it paired with orange sunflowers. There's some green poppy pods in there. And of course, that beautiful, visceral textured marjoram, in this case, in the purple color in the bouquet. I will say I used much more of the purple than the white, and that may only have been because I had about 3 times as much of a patch of the purple as the white. 3 times the patch, 3 times the usage. Probably that is why. Also didn't stake them. I just let them flop. So a lot of the flower heads were unable to be used because when I let them flop, they flopped on the paths. And aside from the dogs, I, as well, was walking on them long before I realized that I love the flowers so much. So I will make sure that they do not get walked on this year, and I'll just sort of support them up on the path side so they don't flop down. And the reason they were doing that, they were actually growing like that because they're in the peony beds, and the peonies are here going out this way. So they were going like that. So I'll just have to give them a little bit of a support so they don't flop right down onto the ground on the pathways between the peony beds. And yeah, really just thoroughly enjoyed using the purple and the white marjorams in the bouquets. That was just like a eureka moment for me, that I was like, I had these for all these years. Why have I not used it before? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is ask you to do something. And that is to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. If you have already done so, thank you very much. And if you are going to subscribe now, again, thank you very much. The next filler flower that we're going to talk about is one that I've used for a number of years more as a foliage filler, and that is cosmos. I love the foliage on the cosmo for for foliage filler. And the way I have it create good foliage filler is by deadheading it all the time. So it grows thicker stems and it grows a much more lush green spiky, are they leaves? I guess they're leaves all over the stems. And they look fantastic in bouquets. But just in case some of them bloomed, I had decided to use the double click cosmos. And what I planted for last year was the snow puff and the rose bonbon. And of course, some of them did bloom. I had been deadheading them up until whenever I stopped deadheading them. And the reason I stopped deadheading them is because I got really, really busy for a few weeks where just, you have to decide what you're not going to do because there's too much to do. And that was one of them. I did not deadhead the cosmos. And then they bloomed and they were beautiful. And I put them in the bouquets and I thought, I like them in the bouquets. I'm not a fan of regular cosmos, but I really, really loved the double clicks. They were just beautiful in bouquets. And the thing with the double clicks is they've got so many petals in them that if some of the petals fall off, they still look good because there's so many other petals with them. Unlike the regular cosmos that you lose one petal and the whole thing's toast because it leaves a big gap in its circle of single petals. So I really, really love them. Now, this next picture that I'm going to show you, you can see why I loved using them as foliage because there's one poking out the top with no flower head on it. And that's just a beautiful texture. But you can see why I decided I also loved the flowers because you can see there's 3 of the rose bonbon double click cosmos and there's 1 of the snow puff double click cosmos. And they too, they can sit high and create that airiness to an otherwise mostly solid bouquet. But they have such a floaty, lightweight feel to them that it takes that solid sphere of heaviness and just lightens it up. It feels like it's moving, even though it's not. Just fell in love with using them as flowers instead of foliage. So for the first time this year, they became one of my favorite filler flowers. Now I've got this paired here with Costa Silver snapdragons. And I know that it's the Costa Silver without even looking at the color of it because this bouquet was taken on September 5th. And it is the second flush of my snapdragons. And I didn't know how useful the second flush was going to be. And I had run out of space for one of my successions of sunflowers. So I had taken out 2/3 of my snapdragons in one bed. And the way my snapdragons were planted is they were planted in blocks of 1, 2, 3 colors. So in order to take out 2/3 of the snapdragons, I had to take out 2 blocks, which left me with the Costa Silver, which I absolutely loved using later on in the season. So next year, even if I have to take out some blocks, I'm going to do the colors more in rows so that if I have to take out blocks, I'll still have the full selection of colors that I'm going to use. Anyway, I've got this paired here with, off to the one side, I have a Cafe au lait rose dinner plate dahlia, and that's that beautiful sort of deep rosy pink color that's poking out through the laurel leaves down below. I have a Keith H. water lily dahlia, which is the orange and yellow one that you can see quite clearly. And then underneath the Keith H. water lily dahlia, I have a gold light sunflower. And that's that bouquet. Next up, we're going to talk about the Costa Silver snapdragons, which I just referred to in the last bouquet. Now, the snapdragons I used as focal flowers in the spring. And as I said, I pulled out 2/3 of them and just cut back the final third just to see what a second flush would look like, because I'd never done that before. And they were beautiful, and I used them all the time. But they weren't big and strong and impactful as the first flush. They were much softer, thinner stemmed, and the bloom size was about 1/3. So it took it from being a focal flower to a filler flower, which is fine with me. So the spring flush of snapdragons, or the first flush of the snapdragons, are definitely a focal flower. But the second flush later on in the season is definitely a filler flower. As you can see in this bouquet, well, the previous bouquet that I showed you, and then this bouquet that I'm going to show you, which was taken on September 1st. I've got it paired with a espresso gladiola at the back, a gold light sunflower, and then an orange sunflower. There is a Spartacus dinner plate dahlia beside the, almost looks like on both sides of the orange sunflower. You can see one snow puff double click cosmo off to the side, and then there's two of the Costa silver snapdragons. Now you can see here how much smaller the size of those snapdragons are to the spring bouquet, which I'll just put up quickly beside it in a little block, just as a comparison to the size of the snapdragons when they're a focal versus a filler. Perfectly useful for both. So I'm very happy to keep all my colors of snapdragons in a second flush, because they were a very, very useful filler flower in the fall without having to plant anything else, just cut them back. So now we're going to talk about snowberries. The snowberries that I used actually are not on my property. Well, no, that's not true. The original snowberries are on my neighbor's property, and then they come in underneath our fence with runners and then come up. And I've been cutting them back like every year because they're in the way. And like with the marjoram, I didn't want them there, so just cut them back. It's just something that I fight with every year. And then this year I had decided to not cut them back because I wanted to try using their foliage, and I used their foliage quite a bit in the spring. But for the first time, we had a super dry latter half of August and all of September, I believe. There might have been one day of rain in there or two, which is really, really unusual for us. We usually the third week of August is just steady rain. And it rains until Labor Day weekend, which we all joke about because the weather gets really bad and it rains right up until kids have to go back to school, and then the sun comes out again. But when it's raining at those times, what it's doing is the snowberries that come out on the snowberry plants get really mushy and brown. But we didn't get that rain this year. In fact, we didn't get rain until later on in September, which is never happened before. And for that reason, the snowberries looked really good. And because I hadn't cut back the branches, because I was using them for foliage, the branches were there with beautiful snowberries on them. So I was cutting them and using them in bouquets. And they are just stunning in bouquets. So you can see in this bouquet here, I've got a labyrinth dinner plate dahlia tucked in low, a red lemon sunflower off to the side. Looks like there's another red lemon off to the other side. I've got Costa silver sunflower showing, and then the snowberries coming out the top to create that airiness with these beautiful, lush, round, white berries. Absolutely gorgeous. And of course, the laurel leaves around the bottom. And I want to be able to use those every single year. So this spring, I'm probably going to dig up some of the shoots that have roots and get them going in pots so that I have access to, and then I can put the pots of snowberry bushes underneath cover when it rains later on in August, and then the berries will keep their lush, beautiful whiteness to them if it rains, so that I have access to the berries. Now, I would need a lot of berries, so I may also try to devise a way to the ones that come up underneath the fence to somehow in that section just cover them up for the duration of the rains and see how that works. But I loved using them, absolutely loved using them, and I really, really want to have them for this upcoming year. They, again, were a first for me this year, again, and only because of the weather. They look terrible once they get hit with rain. They look absolutely horrible. So the next filler flower I'm going to talk about is anemones, which, of course, in sequence, I just went from a bouquet that was done in September. Anemones are back in... they actually were blooming late for me, so I didn't get any anemones or ranunculus until June, which was late. And in fact, everybody was getting late, their flowers and their vegetables late. where I live, at least by 2 weeks, because we had quite a cold and very more wet than usual spring and colder than usual spring, right up until we hit the heat and dry weather. There was no where the temperature slowly warms up and the weather slowly dries off. Didn't happen. It was just cold and wet right up into hot and dry. But the plants weren't conditioning for that sudden change, so everything was late. So my anemones and ranunculus didn't bloom until June. That said, when it comes to the anemones, there was 2 of them that I liked using in bouquets. One was the Duscion sulfide, and the other one was the Marron Bordeaux. Specifically the Marron Bordeaux, because it really held up well to the heat when it was in a bouquet, which surprised me. Held up far better than the anemone. I don't know how to say that. Duscion sulfide. And I used the Bordeaux mostly in the bouquets. I did use the Scion disulfide as well, but usually only on cloudy days, which there was few and far in between of. And the Bordeaux was definitely the star of the show for me when it comes to using anemones as filler flowers. And as you can see, I've got it in this bouquet. Look how beautiful that color pairs with the black button bachelor buttons. And I've also got the green poppy pods. You can see tucked in the back, there is a drumstick allium. And I've got the marjoram flowers. I've got the laurel leaves. I've got a white night sunflower. And in the center there is a now brown allium head. They go from purple, the Globe Master and the Ambassador alliums, they go from purple to greeny white to brown, but I still used them. Because I thought, again, I really like their texture. When they get like that, they're not so dense and heavy, so they don't make that situation where you have to create the bouquet around them. You can actually just have your other flowers pushing into them so that they take less space, which really worked out well. So yeah, the Bordeaux anemones for me were an absolute beautiful addition as a filler flower to bouquets. But I also really liked that fuchsia sulfide one, and they definitely made my top 10. We're now going to talk about the flower that I used in my thumbnail, which is the Snowdrift semi-double Shasta daisy. It is such a fun flower. I found that a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, at the garden center. And I went, this is fun. I love this. So I bought a couple of 1-gallon pots of it. So I went from the sleep and creep. Okay, so I did the creep last year, so I should be in the leap this year. So sleep creep. So I must have bought it 2 years ago. That's the way I'm going to look at it. So 2 years ago, I bought it in its sleep phase. Last year, I bought it in its creep phase. And this year, it should be in its leap phase. And I'm looking forward to that because because it was only in its creep phase last year, I used it, but I didn't have as much of it to use as I would have liked to. And you can see it in this bouquet. Again, I've got a Bordeaux anemone with it. And I've also got an allium in the center. And here you can see the alliums going more to that. It has gone from the purple to the green and is fading into that white. It's almost like a white with a hint of green to it before it hits the brown stage. This bouquet was taken on July 10th. I've got the black button bachelor buttons poking out high, the green poppy pods poking out high, orange sunflowers, laurel leaves, and the 2 heads, there's probably a third one, of the Snowdrift. Now I forgot what it's called. Let me look down here. Snowdrift. Yeah, let me go back. I can't read it on my little tiny picture. Snowdrift semi-double Shasta daisy. Yeah. It's fun. It's got that little frizziness to it. Again, it's one that you want to touch. I mean, I'm looking at it. I really just want to reach out and touch it on my computer screen here. Such a beautiful, beautiful filler flower. So now let's talk about sweet peas. Oh yeah, I forgot. So if you were going, okay, you talked about more than 10. It's because I have a 10A, a 10B, and a 10C because 3 of them were the 10th ones. I mean, really, so it's 13. But I couldn't decide of these last 3 which were the ones that I wanted to keep as my 10th in the list. And that was the anemones, the Shasta daisy, or the double-headed Shasta daisy, Snowdrift, and sweet peas. They all, for me, tie as a 10th to use. And the reason they tie is because all three of those are ones that if I didn't have, I would still be okay. All the other ones, I feel like I really, really needed and used a lot of. But those three, the anemone, the Snowdrift double-headed Shasta daisy, and the sweet peas, if I didn't have them, I would be okay. But that doesn't mean that they didn't add a lot to the bouquets when I did have them. Now, the sweet peas are different than the other two that made the 10 because I don't use them on my roadside flower wagon bouquets because when you well, I use them in the pop cans, which I'll show you what I mean by in the pop cans here, because they're short stemmed and they're easy to, and I go around every morning and I cut every single stem of sweet peas that are blooming, and I put them in the pop cans and I sell them, and that's really fast and that's really easy. But if you want to put them in bouquets, you have to cut longer stems of the sweet peas. And if you get a bunch of them in a bucket with water, they tangle. So cutting them is easy. Well, and even then it's not as easy because you cut them and you got to kind of meander them out of the vine. But they get tangled up in the bucket as well. So they're more labor inducive. Anyway, that create more labor for you. And for that reason, I won't use them in my roadside flower wagon bouquets. However, when I get a custom bouquet, I will always use them because they really up the level of the look of the bouquet. I mean, if you look in this one, you can see I've got the sweet peas coming out the side. And if you moved the bouquet, they would move around. They add so much to the look of a bouquet that, in my mind, if I'm getting a custom bouquet, which is a higher value bouquet, they are an absolute must in them. I also got borage popping out the top of this one, and it's kind of the same thing. I love using them in the borage in a custom bouquet. I do them in the roadside flower wagon, the borage, but only on cloudy days because otherwise the heat will kill them in my flower wagon because it's up on the road and the road gets nailed by the sun all day long. And there's nothing, I can't put anything up there that's a shelter because I'm living in the city. You know, you can't put a structure outside your gate up on the road. So my flower wagon is just a simple little wagon with sides on it and a little roof. I mean, it's as big as I could get away with before I started getting any complaints from the city and being told to take it away. But yeah, so things like the borage, they're much more heat sensitive than the sweet peas are. So I love using it, but again, only on cloudy days. But the sweet peas, I can use in the flower wagon in the pop cans, short stems. So I will be using it all the time anyway that way. But in a custom bouquet, it just looks fantastic. So I've got it paired here with, you can see the large dinner plate dahlia. That's Spartacus. That's the deep dark red one. Right beside it, there's a white night sunflower, which is the white sunflower with the dark center. Just beside that, I've got a Sylvia ball dahlia. There looks like an orange sunflower tipped down below behind the Spartacus. I've got the sweet peas. I've got some of those gorgeous Snowdrift full-headed Shasta daisies tucked in there, as well as the borage. I said the sweet peas already, and some green poppy pods. But yeah, you know, those sweet peas, there's just 3 stems in there, and it just takes it to a whole other level. So definitely need to have those as a filler flower, whether or not I have them for the roadside wagon or not, because again, custom bouquets, an absolute must, and I'm still using them in the roadside flower wagon anyway when it comes to my sales in the pop cans. So I've mentioned quite a few times throughout this video my referencing my video that I did on the focal flowers last week, and if you haven't seen that yet, you should really check it out, and here it is. See you next week. Bye.